On the agenda tonight, we're going to be discussing the possible reasons as to why Elvis Presley was so popular. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So this one's probably going to be just as much a discussion as an analysis, and you guys are welcome to join in the comment section below, because I had a question from somebody who literally asked that. Why was Elvis Presley so popular? But it was from the angle of seeing Elvis as a cover artist and somebody that didn't write his own songs, and how could he get that amount of attention and success. I know that we'll get the classic comment of somebody saying Elvis Presley was so popular because he was Elvis, but unfortunately that doesn't really explain anything. So we'll dive into it, starting with that reference to covers and performing other people's songs. As an artist, when you do that, you're effectively preaching to the converted, because you've got songs that everybody knows and they'll be able to sing along with, and even if it's a song that you haven't written, it has gone through executives at the record label and producers, and it's almost been vetted before it's been released as to how good or how popular they think it's going to be. So it's rare that you're taking a punt on a song that you've just written yourself and you release it. So there is that reason that it's already potentially going to be popular before you've even released it. You've hedged your bets that that's going to happen. A huge part of Elvis's success was down to the fact that nobody had ever seen this before in the mainstream. The way that he performed, the way that he moved on stage. And when I say that they hadn't seen this before in the mainstream, it's because Elvis was influenced by black artists such as Little Richard, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, B.B. King. And by the way, I have videos on those three independently on the channel if you want to check them out. But it's having this unique set of influences who, because of the social landscape at the time, it meant that they wouldn't have had the following or even the exposure that a white artist would have who was performing the same kind of music. So you've got to put that under the spotlight, that Elvis was a guy who was heavily influenced by black artists, but also would spend time with black artists, considering the fact that when we go all the way back, it was actually illegal for black people and white people to mingle together and be part of the same, social crowd. So it's a totally different mindset to try and think back to those times. So it is fair to say that given that social landscape, it would have been the first time that the audience had seen a white artist performing this kind of music and with this kind of enthusiasm on stage. We can't look past the fact that Elvis had a good image. He looked good and he moved well. He had a great voice and was one of these people that could turn his hand to anything. And when I talk about having many strings to your bow as an artist, definitely that's something that Elvis had. Let's not forget that he was a multi-instrumentalist, because he played piano and played guitar. Even though he would play down his ability on those instruments, I do have an analysis video on Elvis playing the guitar where we dive into his ability at the instrument, if you want to check that out independently. But when you throw together this musical ability, the image, and the fact that he got into movies as well was always going to be a great move for getting your face on TV. I always say that the artists back in the 40s, the 50s and the 60s, if you could get your face on TV or in the movies, you are just winning the exposure battle, because there was only radio, and on the radio, it was so competitive. Everybody's songs had to be the same length, and you had to try and keep people's attention, and people couldn't put a face to the sound unless they went out and bought the album and might see a picture on there. But when somebody's on TV, you get to see them and you get a vibe of their personality. Even if they're playing a character in a movie, there's a personality you can relate to and that you can grab hold of. So that certainly was an advantage for Elvis to be in the movies. And when we're talking about personality, Elvis seemed to have this personality where on stage he'd just be outrageous and extrovert, putting everything into his performances, but then off stage he'd seem to be more quiet and wouldn't be as upfront, kept himself to himself. And those kind of personality traits are accessible when trying to decipher the mystery of the personality of the person that you're looking at, or the artist that you're looking at. And it's almost like an introverted extrovert. So away from the stage he's introverted, and on stage, he's extrovert. And it is such a dichotomy between those two that it just makes it really interesting. And there's so many artists that have that seem to be so quiet away from the stage, but then tap into this personality and this performer. I just want to dive a little bit deeper into why I think it works so well and why he was so popular due to his personality. It's because of the authenticity of him as a person, but then matching his performances with his voice. And what I mean by that is that his performances were something that people hadn't seen before. They're really out there. Like I said, extrovert. And his voice was exactly the same. I mean, it was so unique to the point where all you need to do is go, oh, and people know that you're doing an Elvis voice. But his performances and his voice were one, which gives you authenticity. And I'm just going to explain what I mean by saying his performances and his voice were one. They matched. So on the screen, I have a freeze frame from the analysis video that I did on Christina Deutercom. And this is her voice here, represented by these lines. And it's showing you the pitch that she's hitting. And here, the vibrato that's being applied and how wide the vibrato is. So this is opera that we're looking at. And we've got, we're pretty much down to the B4 there. We've got 1, 2, 3.5 semitones worth of vibrato in opera. And that is going to sound really dramatic. That is the whole point. When we look over to the right-hand side, and this is Elvis's voice, we've got Elvis, he's at the G sharp 3 there, is hidden by this white circle, but same as the A flat. And we've got 1, 2, 3 and a bit semitones worth of vibrato. But this is a contemporary voice. This is in the mainstream. So we've got a similar range covered by the vibrato by Elvis that's covered by opera singers. Opera singers are, extrovert. If you want to apply a personality trait to a voice, this width of vibrato pitch-wise would be seen as a bit outrageous. And that's exactly what we got from Elvis's voice. So when I say about his voice and his onstage personality, being one, mixing and being authentic, it's because of this. So you see somebody up on stage who's being outrageous and, dancing the way that he did, putting on the show that he did, but his voice matches what you're seeing. So if he went up on stage and he did all of this, showmanship, but then didn't have an extrovert voice with the vibrato that he applied, then you could argue that it wouldn't connect. It wouldn't seem authentic because he's totally outrageous, but his voice is bland. This is why people saw him as authentic, as an artist, as a singer. No, it doesn't matter which song he sung and who wrote it, because he would be authentic. Whatever he sang, it sounded like it was his song because of the way that he performed it on stage, but because of his voice and the quality of his voice. We can get into the fact that he had that cry in his voice as well, which is something that everybody will be hit by emotionally. When a singer has that and they're great at doing it, it really does hit a chord with everybody listening to it and they connect to that vocalist. But the connection was just all round with Elvis because of this kind of detail. This is one of those videos that could go on for years when we start breaking it down in detail. Money and greed is a great motivator. So if Tom saw this opportunity, it meant that he was going to work really hard to get Elvis out there as much as he could, because it meant that he could make a lot of money. And he knew that he'd make a lot of money because he knew Elvis, he knew Elvis's personality, and above all, he knew that Elvis was just a singer and wasn't business minded, didn't know how the industry worked. And this is something that managers have done for years and years and done over many bands and musicians who don't understand not, well, the music industry, but law in general and signing contracts. So you can argue that the amount of publicity and the gigs that were booked and Elvis's career was really pushed by his manager, but not for the reason that you might expect, that the manager wants the artist to be as big as they can be, and then the artist makes lots of money and is successful, and then he takes a percentage of that. He did take a percentage of it, but he took the majority. Tom knew that he had a great product because of the way that Elvis looked, the way that he sang, and just everything matched, and he had this personality that he probably knew that he could manipulate as well. So it is a shame, but we have to address that business side of things, because the music industry is a business. That's the way it works. And if you're not a good business person, or if you haven't got a good business person behind you, then you won't get that exposure and you won't be as successful as you can be. It's just a shame that some people have great managers, but those managers aren't trustworthy, and there's another motivation for them doing all the work that they are for the artist. So those were just a few reasons as to why I think Elvis was so popular, and let me know what your opinions are and your reasons are in the comments section below. When we're talking about Elvis's voice just by itself, that is something that we could talk about for years because it was so unique, and we have done analysis videos on Elvis's voice, so you can check those out. It's when you start to pair all of these things together that you get this perfect storm of an artist with all of those influences in there as well. Music that was just great music that then Elvis brought to the forefront of the industry and into the mainstream, even though it was already there, but he just tapped into that and brought it to a wider audience. But it didn't hurt that he looked the way that he did, that he was young, and he had this energy and this personality as well that was really authentic. So anyway, thank you guys for watching this video, and if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Like I said, let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you guys at the next one. Rock!